Thank you, Las Ciancorla. I watched Minister O'Brien and his Ministers of State give their budget press conference yesterday. And I have to say, I don't think I've ever seen the Minister look so uncomfortable. He appeared not only deflated, but at some points even defeated, almost like a man who didn't want to be there, not unlike his very brief presence today in the Chamber. And of course, when you look at what happened yesterday, it's hardly surprising the Minister was so uncomfortable. Billions and billions of euros of additional expenditure was announced by almost every other Minister in their press conferences. But in the Department of Housing, virtually nothing extra has been allocated for the delivery of social or affordable homes. And the Minister could come in here and talk about 6 billion euros allocated for next year. That figure is a fiction. Just like when they said 5 billion will be spent this year, that has proved to be a fiction, and the 4 billion last year, a fiction before it. And probably the best way to explain this is the fanfare around the alleged increased funding for the Land Development Agency. A year ago, Minister O'Brien, in his budget press conference, said that he was going to allocate an additional 6 billion euros of capitalisation to the Land Development Agency. He hadn't even discussed it, let alone agreed it, with his other ministers. Days passed by, weeks and then months, and only at the end of December was there a cabinet agreement that in fact instead of 6 billion it would only be 1.25 billion sanctioned at the end of last year, with a further 1.25 billion to be provided this year, but without any clarity on the source of funding. So in fact yesterday's announcement of 1.25 billion from the Land Development Agency is the third time that funding has been announced. Last October, last December and now. And it is not additional funding. It is funding for the LDA to deliver on the existing targets within the existing government plan, nothing additional. In fact, there is still a 3 billion euro black hole in the LDA's finances, creating uncertainty as to whether it will deliver on its programme out to 2028. But when you actually look at what was announced yesterday, the total extra capital spend for housing was a paltry 330 million euros. That's the sum total of what Darragh O'Brien secured in his budget negotiations. And that's why there's no increase in the delivery of social and affordable homes next year on existing targets. Now, the Minister is right, he always said he'd revise those targets at the end of October. But the end of October is too late for 2025, which means we won't get any increase in much needed social or indeed affordable homes next year on existing targets. That means house prices will continue to rise, rents will continue to rise, and so too will homelessness. In fact, one of the few areas where there was a significant increase in funding was homeless emergency accommodation, an extra 61 million euros. An admission by government that next year homelessness is going to continue to rise, and I'm not surprised by that. And interestingly, the government and the ministers greatly celebrated 100 million euros extra for the inflation and controversial First Home scheme. Didn't come to pass. It's only been increased by an extra 30 million, and the targets remain as they were originally at 2,000 purchases next year. The Minister talked about the renters' tax credit. An extra 250 euros is no use if it goes in one pocket and out the other in the form of a rent hike by the landlord. It's essentially a payment to landlords, not to tenants. And Sinn Féin has always argued unless you cap rent at the same time as increasing the credit, it will be of no real benefit. And on the adaptation grants, and Minister Dillon has unfortunately left, but he said there's an extra 25 million. That's not what the budget book says. It says 25 million for disability grants and 75 million for adaptation grants. That's 100 million. That's what was in the budget this year. That's what the budget book says for next year. No increase in retrofitting of social homes, despite the fact that many of the people who live in those homes live in serious fuel poverty. And again, we've been given two different figures on defects. The budget book says 70 million, same as this year. The press conference yesterday said 100 million. Either way, it goes nowhere close to tackling the scale of Celtic Tiger era defects, defective block or other materials. And really, when you look at this budget in the whole, when it comes to housing, it is a wasted opportunity. It is more of the same, and it means nothing next year will change. We have set out a very clear alternative. It would have seen an extra 2.4 billion of direct capital investment in social and affordable homes next year to double the output. And we've also published a detailed and fully costed alternative housing plan to show how you can deliver real affordability, end long-term homelessness and increase the supply of private homes at more moderated prices for first-time buyers. What Minister Ó Broin made clear yesterday and in his very brief appearance here today is next year things will continue the same if this government is in power. House prices will rise, rents will rise, homelessness will rise, and people will continue to be unable to secure secure and adequate affordable accommodation. And that's why what we really need is a general election, a change of government and a change of plan to start tackling this housing crisis.